just in case any of you are wondering what this prostration thing is, where you might have seen me and you might see other people doing prostration where they come down to the ground, touch their forehead on the ground. It's simply to, it's great because everything in Buddhism has a reason and a meaning. So there's no point doing anything unless we know what the purpose is and what the meaning is. So for that one, just if anyone's curious, it's simply to reduce pride. So one of the main mental afflictions one of these mental afflictions we've been talking about, one of them is pride. And it's simply just this mind that thinks I'm more special than others or I'm better than others. So it's something we want to avoid. So there are certain Buddhist practices that people do prostrations. And it's really a good idea for teachers to do that before they teach, just in case there's some sort of like these misconceptions coming up that the teacher might think that they're more special than everyone else. So that's obviously not the case, but these sort of practices help us to remind ourselves of that. And I mean, there's all sorts of other benefits to it. Purifying the mind, cultivating virtue, showing respect for our teachers. If it wasn't for our Dharma teachers, we wouldn't be here. We'd still just be floundering around, having no idea what to do or how to operate in the world. So we have a great deal of respect for our teachers. So let's do some sitting practice. So making ourselves, actually just before I start that, we might have a little vote again to see how we're doing for timing for this session. Maybe a raise of hands, who would like to finish the session in 1 hour or an hour and a half? Maybe we can choose between those two. And if some people need to leave at any time, that's totally fine too. So who would like? Yeah, we could do. Yeah, could have a little breather if we do the hour and a half. So who would like the 1 hour session? Hands up. And who'd be up for the hour and a half? Okay, great. And so if you need to leave at any stage, no problem there. Yeah. So great. So we'll aim for about the hour and a half, and we'll have a little bit of a breather partway through. So let's find ourselves in a nice comfortable position, as comfortable as we can be, ensuring that the spine is nice and straight, but also relaxed. Maybe starting with a few slow, deep breaths into the belly. Gently releasing any rushing or busyness that we've brought along. All of our activities that happened at lunchtime, that's all in the past now. So just gently releasing. And everything we assume or expect or anticipate might happen in the next 10 seconds, the next minute, the next hour, the rest of today and beyond. Just gently releasing it. Just for this short time, just giving ourselves this luxury and privilege of simply allowing ourselves to be present. And inviting ourselves to develop this foundation of relaxation, of ease, gentleness, checking if there's any tightness or tension through the body, gently inviting release, especially in the face, neck, shoulders, the back. We're not trying to make anything happen. We're not trying to be anything that we're not. We're not forcing anything. It's just this wakeful relaxation and ease. And so as we move into the shamatha or mindfulness practice, on this occasion we're choosing our breathing as the object. So we're simply noticing this experience, the different sensations, the rhythm of breathing, the fluctuations, without controlling or manipulating them, just noticing. And so that's the first thing we're doing. This continual awareness of the sensations, the experience of breathing as continuously as we can. And the second thing we're doing is noticing, because inevitably we will become distracted, and that's totally fine. So the second thing is noticing as soon as we can when the mind has become distracted, wandered away, is now doing something else. And as soon as you notice that, we simply release whatever the distraction, no matter how important it seems, without criticizing ourselves. We gently come back to the breathing. What I didn't say was that we have to shut the mind up or we have to stop thinking. That's not the practice. This mental consciousness can come up with all sorts of thinking, activities, stories, memories, plans, hopes, fears. It can be extremely loud and rapid, and it's actually totally fine. We can still do this practice. We're just allowing that activity to happen in the background. We're not giving it our attention. We're not engaging, but we're also not trying to shut it up. Just maintaining awareness of the breathing as best we can. And when we notice we have become distracted, which we will, we gently release and again come back to the breathing. as best we can, maintaining mindfulness of the experience, the sensations of breathing, in a very relaxed, spacious, gentle way. And whenever we notice the mind has wandered away, gotten caught up in some sort of thinking or activity of the mental consciousness, we simply and gently release and we come back to the breathing. Every moment's totally fresh, totally new, unique, and full of potential. And when we're ready, we can gently release the practice. Coming back to the rest of the room. Curious to hear how the practice was for you guys. Does anyone feel like sharing what came up for them? Hi, welcome. Can we grab the microphone, please, Jen?
What?
Peaceful and quiet. Thank you.
I just fell asleep a little
Sleepy?
bit.
Yep. Anyone notice a lot happening? A lot of busyness, a lot of activity? Yeah. Some of you? Okay. The busyness wasn't annoying? Yep. Yeah, I find that that's a really important distinction to make with meditation practice, that often I hear people say that, oh, I can't meditate because my mind's so busy, or I can't stop thinking. But I'd go so far as to say it's actually impossible to just go, right, now I'm going to stop thinking. It's not feasibly possible. So obviously, as someone develops this practice to a really deep level, there won't be any thinking, but that's very much down the track. And the way to get there is not by saying to ourselves, right, I'm going to stop thinking. So effective practice, mindfulness, shamatha practice for a long time, not just the very beginning, but for a lot of stages of this practice, is to allow all of this mental activity to come up, all of this activity of this mental consciousness we've been talking about, all of the thoughts and the stories and the beliefs and the memories and plans, hopes and fears. There's a endless list, a bottomless reel of stuff that will come up. And so, as we said, the practice is to allow it to do that, and then, but we're just not getting caught up, just not engaging. It's like if someone was to be there in front of us, yelling at us about whatever, yelling offensive things at us. As hard as it might be, we actually don't have to react or respond to that. It is actually possible to just totally witness it. We're not rejecting it. We're not fighting them. We're not trying to shut them up. It would be possible for us to just simply be aware of it, just see the experience for what it is, not overlay anything onto it, not get reactive, not add drama to it. So yeah, it's a great tool to be able to develop, as I said, not only on the cushion when we're practicing, but as we're engaging in the world, to not only be involved in the outside world and doing what we need to do and engaging with what we need to engage with, but at times and having part of our awareness on what's coming up in the mental consciousness, and taking the time to develop some discernment over what the stuff that's coming up, is it going to be beneficial or not if I respond in that way, if I engage in that way, if I accept that belief, if I, as all of these things come up, starting to discern what I can just continue to let go, and what is like, okay, that's wholesome, that's virtuous, that's in the nature of reality, and I can respond in that way. I'm just going to jump back a little bit. We talked earlier today about I can't remember the exact context of it, but it was I think it was in the context of like having pleasurable things, pleasurable experiences, and coming into contact with pleasurable objects in the external world. So having a nice chocolate cake, or enjoying a nice view, or winning Tats Lotto, or flying our private jet, or whatever it might be. So I find it really helpful to make this distinction between our needs and everything that's above that. So when we're looking at, and also to make the distinction between pleasure and the craving. So there's a whole heap of needs that we need. Food, clothing, shelter, medical care, education's virtually a need these days. I would even add community in there. Like there's a bunch of needs, but especially our basic needs of like shelter, food, clothing, healthcare. These sorts of things are really important for us to be able to have a healthy, happy, happy life, to experience well-being. But then it's good to notice that, and maybe we need things like, we need certain modes of transport to be able to go where we want to go and do the things you need to do, engage in life. But then if we step that up from like if we have a Toyota Corolla and then we think, no, we need the Porsche 911. Well, do we need that, or are we stepping more into that the want category, and that sort of going above and beyond what we need? So I think the main reason for saying that is that we shouldn't neglect our needs. I think they're very important, that it's only on the basis of having, for most of us, unless we're highly realized beings. You hear stories of some of these Tibetan lamas that were put into concentration camps in China and these sorts of things, and they still flourished. They were still so joyful and had a great time. they even say it was like a retreat, going on retreat for them. So it's like, this is a whole nother level of practice. So we're not there yet, but so for us, we need these basic things in our lives. And so it's important that we don't neglect those, that we honor that, and we go about making sure that that's happening. It's really just the questioning of like, above and beyond that, do we need the second car or the house that's twice as big or the third piece of chocolate cake or our own helicopter or whatever it is. They're the things that are worth questioning. But then even coming back more specifically to the Buddha's teachings, is that it's not our possessions and it's not our pleasures that are the problem. They're not the cause of our suffering. The cause of our suffering is this craving. It's often called attachment. I prefer to use the word craving because it's really, well, actually the definition of attachment is a mind which holds an object or a person and exaggerates their positive qualities. So there's exaggeration above and beyond what's there, and then it wishes to have it. So it's got this exaggeration, projecting, imputing that something's better than it is, basically, that that's going to bring us happiness. And then it's that craving of like, right, I need that. Give me that, sort of at the expense of others. So it's a little bit like the addictive sort of a mind. I think we're all a little bit, we're all a little bit like addicts to some degree, just different variations of it. Some drug addicts are it's very extreme and very obvious, but I think all of us have these addictions and cravings for external things in particular that we think are going to bring us our happiness. So that, I think that's a really important distinction. It's not we can still have the fancy cars actually, and we can still have the nice house and whatever it is. So that's not the problem. That's when we start craving and grasping at it, like, and sort of like getting protective over it, like everyone else keep away, like don't come near my things, sort of like these kind of minds. That's actually what's causing our suffering. So yeah, we don't all, I mean, some people do choose to give up everything and just come back to wearing robes and having a begging bowl, and that's their practice, and that's great. But some people choose to still live in the world as millionaires and practice Dharma too, and that's their choice. And if they can practice successfully in that way, that's great. So it's for each of us to look at how we want to work with our situation in that way. So I said previously that on the Saturday in 2 weeks' time, we'd be looking at the foundation of all good qualities, this Lam Rim text, but we're actually going to jump into that today. Jen will hand that around. We won't go through the whole text today. We'll just start on it today, and then we'll continue the rest of it in a couple of weeks' time. And so, as I said, this text is a graduated path to enlightenment, a series of steps and practices that we can engage in from where we are today all the way up to enlightenment. And there's a couple of additional concepts in here and practices to introduce above what we've talked about so far. So this first one is called renunciation. So this is actually in verse 5. So maybe we'll read. Does someone feel like reading from the start? And we'll read up to verse 6. Okay.
The foundation of all good qualities by Lama Tsongkhapa. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and venerable Guru. Correct devotion to him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect.
Who'd like to jump in next?
Number 2, understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful and is difficult to find again. Bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence.
Number 3, the life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like the shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow.
Number 4, finding firm and definite conviction in this. Please bless me always to be careful, to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds.
5, seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. They are uncertain and cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation.
6 is led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teaching is keeping the Prater Maraksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice.
And we'll leave it there for today. Thanks, Jen. I think you've done that before, haven't you? You almost sound like you've got that voice of like someone who might read audio books or something. All right, great. Have you been to the center before? All right, great. Welcome back.
50 years ago with Lama Yeshe. What did you do 50 years ago with Lama Yeshe?
I studied in the Himalayas with the retreat there outside of Nepal. And yeah, it's quite an experience. Very powerful. Changed my life.
Thanks for sharing, and yeah, welcome back. I'm sure you've been doing other things, yeah. Great. Yeah, I'm just enjoying at the moment. One of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche have these books that they freely offer or by donation. There's quite a few of them up on the back desk here. You'll see a combination of them there. I just love coming back to these books. I'm reading one of the Lama Yeshe's books at the moment, Becoming Your Own Therapist. And it just amazes me. The one I'm reading at the moment, though, his teachings in 1974 in Melbourne. But yeah, probably similar era when he was first teaching to Westerners, and such would have been so beautiful to be there. So yeah. Great. So thanks everyone for reading those first few verses. So this verse number 5 here is quite relevant to what we were just talking about with this seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. So as we just made that distinction that it's not the pleasures, it's not the possessions, it's not necessarily the comforts and enjoyments that we have that are the problem. It's this it's called seeking here, but it's this craving, exaggeration of the positive qualities of these things and craving them, and that's what's actually the door to our suffering. So we talked before about the root cause, which is the self-grasping ignorance, and then the other two. So that's if we categorize it as one cause. If we expand a little bit to talk about 3 causes of suffering, we talk about the self-grasping ignorance, we talk about craving, and we talk about anger. So this one, verse 5 here, is talking about the craving in particular. It's because they're uncertain, they cannot be relied upon. And so recognizing their shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. And so, as I was introducing before, a couple of new concepts here that we're going to introduce is, the first one is renunciation, and the other one is bodhicitta. And so these are the three principal aspects of the path. The third one being the wisdom of emptiness, which we talked a little bit about. So there's all these sort of different ways to categorize the teachings. There's like, you can categorize it in one way, in two sort of terms, or three. So it might be a little bit of a sort of a jigsaw puzzle at the moment, but we're just sort of coming at it from a few different angles and looking at a few different ways to talk about it. So this renunciation is this mind that strongly wishes for the bliss of liberation. So it's a mind that's wanting to break that cycle of samsara that we mentioned earlier, this uncontrolled cycle of us moving from one existence to the other, being controlled, like our anger and our craving just comes up and we just act it out, and we're creating more problems. This uncontrolled cycle of creating problems, experiencing problems, being born, dying. And so someone who's cultivating renunciation, they're recognizing this and they're like, I'm not okay with that. From now on, I'm going to be working for liberation instead. So giving up, reducing and eventually giving up these mental afflictions and this ignorance, and cultivating wisdom, compassion, and all of the other virtues. And then bodhicitta, well, there's a lot that could be said about bodhicitta. So we're really just barely even scratching the surface here, but bodhicitta is the motivation that we're encouraged to bring to particularly our Dharma practice, but to all of our actions. It's a beautiful way to start the day, cultivate bodhicitta. And so there's two aspirations in it. It's the aspiration to achieve enlightenment, aspiration to become a Buddha, and to do that for the benefit of others. So for the benefit of, I often say the benefit of all of us, because when we become enlightened, all of our own needs are met, all of our positive qualities are fully manifest, all of our suffering and non-virtues are overcome. So by achieving enlightenment, our own wishes are fulfilled, and we're doing that for the benefit of others. And then we're in a position where we can most skillfully, powerfully, and effortlessly assist and show others how to do that for themselves. So this is bodhicitta, and as I say, there are probably some lamas that could talk about it forever. It's probably endless what could be said about bodhicitta, but that's probably the most succinct explanation of it, is that definition of the two aspirations: to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of others. Any queries coming up? So let's jump back to the first verse. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and venerable Guru. And this is, to my mind, this is actually really simple. There's all sorts of ways that we can misunderstand gurus. There are gurus who haven't behaved as well as they should have. There's sticky stuff that can happen with gurus. So the way that I really like to understand this one is that a guru is like a tour guide. So if we want to go to a foreign country, we need to know, I mean, some people might just go traveling and just absolutely wing it, but it'd be very rare. Most people will at least know something about the place, where it is, how to get there roughly, and a little bit about what to expect when they get there. But so this is a reasonable way to go to somewhere we've never been before, is to the tour guide might not necessarily go with us the whole way, but we sort of learn about what's going to be there, and how to get there. And so, and then the easiest way is to actually have a tour guide who's done all the organizing, knows the whole the itinerary, has organized everything for us, and will go there with us, and they'll walk us through everything and navigate it with us. So this Buddha Dharma, this practicing the Dharma, this working towards enlightenment, it's somewhere we've never been before. It's an internal landscape, so it's different because it's not a physical place or a physical landscape. So it's an internal journey, but we just simply need someone who's at least in front of us on that journey. Ideally, they'll be fully awakened so they can show us the whole path, but our teacher needs to be at least ahead on that path than we are. And it's simply a matter of that they have heard the teachings, understood them, put them into practice, realize them to the extent that they have, and then only then can they show us what we need to do to get there. So it's very practical, and I would say it's essential. I mean, it's not like we need to have a guru and have like this, really important spiritual disciple relationship or anything. Like some people may have never even met their teacher before. They might have read a lot of books and be receiving teachings online or whatever it might be. Some people will have a lot of different teachers. So yeah, we can sort of get a little bit kind of romantic or a bit sort of like worked up about this guru thing, but it's really just that practicality of someone needs to be one step ahead on the path from us to be able to teach us and show us how to get there. Someone asked the Dalai Lama once, is it essential to have a guru? And he paused, like he often does. He paused and considered for a little while. And his answer was no. So I've just contradicted myself there, which is great. His answer was no, but it can save you a huge amount of time. So yeah, as the Dalai Lama said, it's not essential, but if we want to make best use of our time and energy, we want to make as few mistakes as possible, as less sort of going around in circles, then having qualified teacher or teachers is super valuable. And so it's not something we just jump straight into. We're encouraged to take a lot of time to listen to a lot of teachings from people to determine if their teachings are authentic, if their behavior is authentic, if they're genuine practitioners, asking lots of questions, all this stuff. So it's nothing to rush into. It's something that happens more organically over time as we start to hear more teachings, develop more trust in what these teachers are saying, and we can start to build up more confidence. And then we start applying effort from our side about what they're teaching and putting into practice and doing what we need to for outside. And we respect them greatly, just not as a thing that we have to cultivate, that we're expected to do, but it's like to recognize the kindness of these teachers and how much time they take to how much time they've taken to study and practice for themselves, and to share that with us is really quite mind-blowing. And so verse 2, understanding the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful, is difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence. So we've been born as human beings this time around. That's probably not something we've really considered that much. It's like we sort of maybe feel like, well, we're a human being, we're probably always going to be that. That was just a given. It's not that big a deal being a human being, you know. Probably doesn't seem like too much of a fuss, but from a Buddhist point of view, this is a really fortunate type of existence to take. There's many much more unfortunate realms and bodies to be born into, and a human being is considered to be one of the most fortunate in that we have this intelligence that we can use to understand these concepts, to understand the Dharma, to reflect on our own minds, to understand our own minds, to practice the Dharma. Sometimes when I say to people that this is not something that animals can do, my partner's an animal lover and she's like, how do you know that? I think she thinks that dogs are enlightened, but maybe they are, but dolphins too, and elephants, and yeah. So it's not denying there's a lot of intelligence in the animal realm, but in my experience and based on the teachings, well, from what I can perceive and based on the teachings, that humans have got the next level of ability to comprehend and understand, and this next level of intelligence, which we're encouraged to use, so that we're not just believing things blindly or based on faith or just because someone said so. That's one of the things the Buddha said. He was like, don't just believe something because I said so. It's, yeah, need to investigate it for yourself, use your own intelligence, use your own discernment, and try it on, see if it works, and only then take that as your practice. So, yeah, we've got this human life. And particularly in this context, it's not only human life that's valuable, but we probably most of here have all of the other qualities of what's called in the Lama, it's called the precious human rebirth. Precious human rebirth. So probably won't go through all of them in great detail, but I'll just mention a few of them where we don't live in a country of sort of like, well, they call them barbarians, but it's sort of like we don't live in a country that's ruled by really aggressive and sort of like even more ignorant sort of places. Like we hear about some places in the news where it's just there's so much corruption and deception and violence and all of these things happening in these places, which makes it incredibly hard to do these sorts of things and do these practices. So we're free from living in those sorts of areas. We're free from living in a place where there's no Dharma, no teachings. We're free from having physical conditions where our senses are impaired, where we can't hear or see. Obviously, if only one of those senses is impaired, it's still possible. It makes it harder. If multiple are impaired, that can make it impossible to receive these teachings, to understand them. And we're also free from extreme, well, they're called wrong views, but it's sort of like we're free from being really closed off. We have at least some of that open-mindedness that we mentioned earlier. It's like we're not just totally convinced that no, only everything I believe is how it is, and I don't want to hear anything else. I've got it all sorted out. Thanks very much. See you later. So we probably don't have that. So at least we have that curiosity and that that openness to potentially investigate a little deeper. We're in this country where the Buddha's teachings are freely available. This Dharma is flourishing. There are places around the world where it's illegal to do this kind of thing, which just seems absolutely crazy. So we're free from that, which is a huge benefit. Yeah, there's a few other ones I probably won't go into in too much detail, but the Buddha appeared on this planet. He taught. The Dharma still exists. If any of these weren't true, then we wouldn't be here. There is a Sangha. We talk about Sangha. It's like a spiritual community. It'd be extremely difficult to practice, to study and practice these teachings on our own, in a bubble. We really depend on a community of like-minded people who are on a similar path, have a similar sort of a mindset, similar approach, that we can support each other and go on that journey together. And this last one is actually that we have loving companions. Again, just from that point of view of if we were in a place where we were receiving nothing but abuse and harshness from everyone, then it would be extremely difficult to feel safe enough and be curious about softening our heart, cultivating compassion and these sorts of practices. Any questions coming up on any of that? So from a Buddhist point of view, a precious human rebirth is way, way, way more valuable than winning Powerball in this big scheme. In this bigger picture. You're probably getting a little bit of an idea of the Buddhist view. The Buddhist worldview is very large. It's really across a huge amount of time and space. And so winning Powerball would be great for 6 months, a year or 2 years. They often say that people that win Powerball or Lotto, they just have a ball for a couple of years and then they just go back to, in terms of their well-being, their happiness, then they just basically go back to where they were or drop even lower. Because it creates a lot of problems having, it can create a lot of problems having a huge amount of wealth. So, but so from the Buddhist point of view, a precious human rebirth is way more valuable because we have the opportunity to learn about cultivating causes for future lifetimes. What we're doing now is we're creating causes for many, many future lifetimes to come, and what those lifetimes are going to look like, where we're going to be, what our experiences are going to be. So by cultivating virtue, this is much more beneficial for not just this life, the benefits that we get from practicing in this life, but for all of our future lives. Got a question? Yeah, sure.
Would you say that in Buddha's time, life was not quite as complicated, even in India, as it is today, and which makes these teachings even more important to take on, you think?
Yeah, it's hard to know for sure. But I think one of the main differences is that our way of life is much faster. Based on what I know about ancient India, which is not a lot, but I think it's a fair assumption to make that our pace of life is a lot faster. We get a lot more stimulation through technology and other inventions and things. We get bombarded by a lot more outer influences, the media and television and all sorts of things. So yeah, in some ways, yes. I think it's the case that our lives are more complicated now, but at the same time, a human being now who's under the control of karma and delusion, karma and mental afflictions, is essentially the same human being that was alive thousands of years ago under the control of karma and delusion as well. So there's differences, but when we come back to the real essence of who we are and how we exist, I think it's probably the same. Yeah.
Oh, what's the difference between a precious human rebirth and a human rebirth?
Yeah, so the precious human rebirth is a human rebirth which has all of these freedoms and richness, as we call them, which I went through briefly about not being in a country with barbarians. The Buddhist teaching exists. All of these sorts of qualities. So yeah, someone can have a human rebirth that's not necessarily what would be considered a precious human rebirth. But if someone has a precious human rebirth, it's necessarily a human rebirth. So just looking at the time, we're at 25 past 5. So maybe we can have a 5-minute little breather, bathroom break if we need to. If Wendy needs to head off, that's great. Thanks for coming, Wendy. Yeah. And we'll finish off in 5 minutes time. Might do a little song, a bit of mantra with the guitar to finish up. So yeah, we'll see you in 5 minutes.